So picture this. You are sitting in the theater, the lights are down, and it's that highly anticipated, almost impossible cinematic reunion.
Oh, yeah. The one everyone's waiting for.
Exactly. Suddenly, right there on the screen in Avengers, Doomsday, is Steve Rogers. But, he doesn't look like the clean-cut Captain America you are used to seeing.
No, not at all.
Right. He is sporting long hair, this really thick beard, wearing street clothes, and get this, he is standing right alongside the Fantastic Four. Just take a second and let that image settle in.
It's a striking visual, right? It just completely upends all our expectations of where we left that character.
Yeah, totally.
Because we saw him get his perfect, peaceful conclusion.
Yeah.
And now suddenly he looks like a guy who has been, living totally off the grid in some completely different reality.
And that jarring visual, that exact image, is why we are doing this deep dive today. Welcome in, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So our mission today is to unpack the, frankly, incredibly complex temporal mechanics, the storyline shifts, and these just mind-bending paradoxes that actually explain Steve Rogers' journey.
It is quite the journey, yeah.
Right from the very end of Avengers. Endgame, all the way to this unexpected, super rugged return. We are going to figure out how he ended up in that specific room with those specific people. But to do that, we kind of need to look back at the baseline facts of his departure.
Well, yeah, those details are crucial because, the exact mechanics of how he left, they basically dictate everything about how he comes back.
Right, so let's set the scene. At the end of Endgame, Steve steps on at that time platform. He's got a briefcase full of Infinity Stones and Thor's hammer, Mjolnir.
Just those two things. That's important.
Exactly, just those. And the mission parameters are super clear, right? Return the artifacts to the exact moments they were taken from so those branched realities don't collapse.
Simple enough.
Right. And for the Avengers watching him, he is supposed to be gone for exactly 5 seconds in the main timeline.
5 seconds.
But as we all saw, he blows right past his re-entry point. He doesn't come back to the pad. Instead, he reappears on a nearby bench, just chilling as an elderly man.
Looking very content.
Yeah. He's lived a full life, he's wearing a wedding ring, and this is the kicker. He has a completely pristine, unbroken Captain America shield to hand over to Sam Wilson.
Which, presents a massive physical anomaly.
Right, because Thanos hacked his original shield to pieces.
Exactly. Steve did not take a spare with him on his time-traveling errands. He only had the hammer and the stones. So, for anyone listening and wondering, why are we analyzing a decade-old plot point? Well, it matters because this isn't just a case of, simple comic book continuity errors.
See, I always thought it was just a loose end, right? Like they just glossed over it for the sake of a really beautiful send-off.
A lot of people did. But it's so much deeper than that. What we are really looking at here is kind of a masterclass in how serialized storytelling handles the consequences of a happily ever after.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because in a multiverse, you can't just walk off into the sunset without leaving footprints. Actions, especially time-altering actions, they always have cosmic reactions.
It's the butterfly effect, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve got his happy ending with Peggy Carter. But in a universe governed by really intricate rules of time and space, that ending was always going to come with a very steep bill.
The bill comes due. Wow, that makes me think about, who is actually collecting that bill. Because Steve's little time-traveling retirement plan, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. To understand where he ended up, we really have to look at the universe's new management.
Oh, for sure. We have to look at the evolution of the Time Variance Authority, the TVA.
Right.
Because they have undergone this massive philosophical shift since Steve first went back in time.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because under the secret control of He Who Remains, the Kang variant, the TVA was brutal.
Unbelievably brutal.
Their entire job was just to prune timelines entirely out of existence. Trillions of lives just erased, all to maintain one single sacred timeline. It was basically an authoritarian regime designed purely to prevent other, more dangerous Kang variants from manifesting.
Total order.
Yeah, order at the absolute cost of free will.
Right, but that multiversal time loom, the physical machine that actually wove reality into a single thread that has been destroyed.
Yeah.
Loki literally replaced the loom with himself.
Which is such a wild concept.
It really is. Using his god-level magic, he now sits on a throne at the end of time, physically holding the multiverse together with his bare hands. He completely reshapes reality into this massive structure that looks like Yggdrasil, the world tree from Norse mythology.
Oh, I love that tree metaphor. Because a tree behaves so differently than a mechanical loom, right? Like a loom forces threads into a predetermined pattern, but a tree grows organically.
Exactly. It grows. It allows for free will. New branches can grow in completely unexpected directions. And crucially, some branches will just, well, they'll reach their natural end and die off.
Kind of like the slow, natural death of Deadpool's universe that we saw referenced recently.
Spot on, yeah. That's exactly it. Loki's mission now is basically just to keep the tree healthy without robbing people of their actual choices. Meanwhile, the TVA, which is now led by B-15, they've pivoted.
They aren't the bad guys anymore.
Right. They aren't pruning innocent timelines just for existing. Now they are focused solely on stopping Kang variants and, more importantly for our discussion, preventing incursions.
Okay, let's actually define an incursion for a second for you guys listening, because that is really the engine driving this entire mystery. So an incursion is basically when two universes collide and utterly destroy each other, right? Usually because someone is tampering with the multiverse.
Precisely. The mere presence of a multiversal anomaly in a timeline where they fundamentally don't belong, it creates friction. It degrades the very boundary between realities.
Which perfectly brings me to this incredibly brief, just fascinating shot in the Doomsday trailer.
Oh, the card scene.
Yes. It's this quick shot of someone holding a TVA card. On the back of the card is the Yggdrasil tree, and on the front is a picture of Loki. And the way the trailer is edited, it really heavily implies Loki is the one holding the card, just kind of staring at his own picture.
Which is a classic marketing misdirection, by the way.
Completely classic. But if you look closely at the details, and this is where it gets crazy, if you look at the hand holding that card, there is a wedding band on the finger.
Yep.
Loki isn't married. That is Steve Rogers' hand.
It's such a brilliant catch. Because if you look at the lighting, the curtains, just the overall domestic aesthetic of that really brief shot, it strongly suggests this scene actually takes place in the mid-century house where Steve and Peggy are living there happily ever after.
It's like, imagine you decide to skip out on a massive, incredibly expensive restaurant bill, right? And you flee to live off the grid on some remote island. You totally think you got away with it.
You're in the clear.
Right. And then, 10 years later, the restaurant's brand new manager, who just happens to be your old frenemy, personally shows up at your beach house.
The universe's new manager has arrived.
Yeah.
But we do need to think about how he arrives.
Good point.
Given Loki's new position, at the end of time, literally holding reality together, he isn't physically walking into Steve's living room. He can't let go of the tree. He is likely projecting himself.
Oh, you mean an illusion, like what he used to do in combat?
Similar? Yeah, but on a cosmic scale.
Yeah.
Depicting this detailed interactive image of oneself in the external world while physically being somewhere else. Kind of think of Luke Skywalker on Crate in The Last Jedi.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right, so Loki's projecting himself across the multiverse into Steve's specific branch because there is a catastrophic problem.
Okay, let's contrast that. Under the old TVA rules, a squad of heavily armed Minutemen would have just, kicked the door down, arrested Steve, and melted his entire timeline into absolutely nothingness. Problem solved.
Exactly. But Loki respects free will now. He doesn't want to destroy Steve's life or erase Peggy's timeline. However, and this is the big however, Steve's unsanctioned presence in the past, living a life he originally wasn't a part of, it's causing a massive strain on the time stream.
He is basically a foreign body in a closed system.
Yes. So by simply existing in a timeline where he fundamentally doesn't belong, Steve is toxic to the fabric of reality. He's going to accidentally cause an incursion and destroy the very universe he just fought so hard to save.
Wow. That is the tragic irony of it, right? Loki cannot just leave him there. The risk to the main MCU timeline is just way too great. So Loki is faced with a huge dilemma. How do you preserve free will, allow Steve to keep his hard-earned family, but still remove the existential threat to reality?
And this is where we get into a really fascinating compromise when you look at how the narrative has to play out. To save Steve's original timeline, Loki offers Steve and his family a way out. He actually relocates them to a completely different universe.
Universe 828.
Exactly. And Universe 828 is not just some random destination. It is a highly specific, culturally tailored environment for Steve Rogers.
Right, because it's set in the 1960s, which makes perfect sense for Steve. It aligns with the exact era where he would feel most culturally comfortable, right in that mid-century pocket. But I mean, surely Loki didn't just pick it for the aesthetic, right? There has to be a structural reason why Steve can exist there safely.
There absolutely is. It is a robust, utopic reality, heavily protected by its resident heroes, the Fantastic Four.
Okay, but wait, how does moving him from one universe to another stop an incursion? Isn't he still, a foreign body no matter where he goes?
That's a great question. It comes down to the structural integrity of the receiving universe. Universe 828, under the watch of Reed Richards, likely possesses the technological or even cosmic shielding necessary to absorb an anomaly without the fabric of their reality degrading.
Okay, I see.
It's a very elegant solution by Loki. You take the man out of the fragile timeline, and you place him in a heavily defended universe where his multiversal signature can be stabilized.
So does that mean Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four are essentially Steve Rogers' oblivious multiverse landlords for a decade? Like, they are out there fighting massive cosmic threats while Steve is just quietly mowing his lawn a few miles away.
That seems to be exactly the scenario. And, that 10-year time frame you just mentioned, that is the key to reconciling the visual changes we see in the character. Steve lives peacefully in Universe 828 for 10 full years.
Which perfectly explains the completely new look in the Doomsday trailer. The long hair, the thick beard, the civilian street clothes. He hasn't been Captain America for a decade. He's just been, a father and a husband.
Right. But of course, the peace doesn't last. Because Doomsday happens. And when things go wrong on a multiversal scale, you can't really hide anymore, even behind a white picket fence.
Especially not from the Fantastic Four. They are brilliant, especially Reed Richards. So when the multiversal fabric starts tearing during Doomsday, won't they immediately detect Steve?
Absolutely they will. Reed Richards' instrumentation is basically designed to monitor cosmic background radiation and quantum signatures. When reality starts shaking, Reed is going to scan his own planet and realize, hey, this random guy living in the suburbs has a completely different vibrational frequency.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he possesses an otherworldly multiversal signature.
He's going to stick out like a sore thumb on their scanners. But what does Reed actually do with that information? Like, Reed might deduce that Steve's presence is somehow contributing to an incursion between their two worlds and decide he has to take Steve back to the mainline MCU to save Universe 828. Kind of like a multiversal deportation.
Right. That is one theory.
Yeah.
It's very much the pragmatist approach.
I have a hard time buying that, though, I'm not going to lie. Would Reed really deport a hero, his wife, and a child? That feels incredibly cold, even for someone as scientifically detached as Reed sometimes is. Isn't it way more likely that Reed figures out who Steve is and decides to use him?
That is a very valid pushback. Because Reed Richards is fundamentally a hero. A much more collaborative scenario is that Reed recognizes Steve's tactical genius and recruits him.
Yeah, exactly.
He might just go to him and say, look, we are facing a multiversal collapse. You're originally from the universe we need to coordinate with, so I need you as our ambassador and our strategist.
I really love the idea of Steve acting as the bridge between the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. It just gives him immediate utility in the story. But okay, exploring this 10-year gap brings me to a massive logical flaw that I cannot wrap my head around.
Lay it on me.
Okay, if Steve has been chilling in a 1960s alternate universe with the Fantastic Four for a decade and then gets pulled directly into the multiversal war of Doomsday, how on earth does the elderly Steve Rogers sitting on the bench in Endgame have a pristine shield to give to Sam Wilson?
The shield, yes. This is where the temporal mechanics require us to literally rethink cause and effect entirely.
Let's review the facts just to be sure. Thanos chopped Steve's original shield in half. Steve goes back in time with no shield. He gets intercepted by Loki, moved to Universe 828, lives there for 10 years, fights in Doomsday, maybe fights in Secret Wars, but somehow, at the very end of his life, he shows up on that bench with a perfect vibranium shield. Did he, stop by Wakanda on the way to the bench?
No, he didn't have a new one made at all. To understand this, we have to meticulously unpack what physicists and science fiction writers call the Bootstrap Paradox.
Okay, a closed time loop where an object basically has no discernible origin.
Correct. The Steve Rogers we're going to follow in Doomsday, the one with the beard who has lived in the 1960s for a decade, he's not yet lived the life of the old man on the bench.
Right, so from Steve's perspective, the conversation on the bench simply hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. We have to track the timeline purely from Steve's chronological point of view. Think about it. He leaves the time platform in Endgame. He returns the stones, he goes to Peggy, he gets moved to Universe 828 by Loki, 10 years pass, Doomsday happens. Now, imagine this rugged, bearded Steve Rogers stepping off a ship or stepping through a portal into Avengers Tower during Doomsday. He looks across the room, and he sees Sam Wilson wearing the Captain America suit and holding the shield.
Wait. If this is Steve's chronological perspective, it will be the first time he is seeing Sam since he left on the time platform.
Exactly. For Steve, he hasn't seen Sam in 10 years. And he has never, in his own lived experience, seen Sam actually operating as Captain America.
That means Sam Wilson has to explain to Steve Rogers that an older version of Steve is the one who gave him the shield in the first place.
That is the crux of the Bootstrap Paradox. And it points to a very specific, really poignant sequence of events for the future. Sam Wilson is Captain America now. But eventually, decades from now, Sam will retire. Or tragically, he might fall in battle. Regardless of the exact circumstances, a time will come when Sam leaves that shield behind.
And because Steve's story is ongoing, Steve is going to be there when Sam is done with it.
Steve will be there. Having lived through Doomsday and whatever follows, knowing the history he is obligated to fulfill to maintain the timeline, Steve will take that exact shield, Sam's shield, and he will travel back in time to that bench in Endgame.
Okay, let me try an analogy on you to see if I'm grasping the physics of this correctly.
Go for it.
Imagine you inherit a beautiful vintage family heirloom watch from your grandfather. You cherish it your whole life. But then, years later, you discover a time machine, and you realize the only way your grandfather ever got this watch is if you take it back in time and gift it to him as a young man so he can eventually pass it down to you. The watch has no original point of creation. It just exists in a permanent loop.
That is a flawless breakdown of the paradox.
Yeah.
The physical object is trapped in an endless loop of causality. It raises some fascinating questions about the physical degradation of vibranium. Honestly, does the shield age infinitely?
Yeah.
But narratively, it is brilliant.
It really is.
Think about the emotional weight of that realization for the characters. Think back to that scene on the bench in Endgame. Sam looks at the shield, and he says to old Steve, "It feels like it belongs to someone else."
And Steve replies, "It doesn't." Oh my God, I always thought he was just being encouraging, trying to give Sam a confidence boost.
He literally meant it. He was stating a physical fact. That shield was never Steve Rogers' shield. From the very first moment Steve laid eyes on that specific physical object in Doomsday, it was in the possession of Sam Wilson. It was always Sam's.
That completely recontextualizes the entire scene for me. It layers it with this profound sense of destiny. But, it also dictates some pretty rigid terms for Steve's future. If he still has to live long enough to become the old man on the bench, there is so much road left for him to travel, and we know for a fact he survives it.
Oh, absolutely. There are several potential future paths for Steve based on these mechanics.
Yeah.
Because he is back on the board, we could easily see him sharing the screen with Sam and Bucky in a future project. He obviously has to survive through the multiversal chaos of Secret Wars.
And without the burden of having to carry the shield himself, he could take on entirely new roles. Like, we could see him running for president, or maybe stepping up to become the director of SHIELD, acting as the strategic mastermind coordinating heroes across different timelines.
And when all of that is finally said and done, when the character is truly finally ready to retire, Steve can use his new multiversal contacts, specifically his relationship with Loki and the TVA, to safely navigate that final jump back to the bench. That is exactly how he closes his time loop and fulfills the prophecy without causing an incursion.
If you are listening to this right now, I really want you to try and put yourself in Steve's shoes during the upcoming events of Doomsday. Think about the psychological weight of his situation. How comforting, or perhaps how absolutely terrifying would it be to know exactly where your life ends up?
It is an incredible burden. I mean, he knows he survives. He knows he gets to grow old with Peggy.
Yeah.
He knows he eventually sits on that bench and hands over the shield.
He effectively has plot armor in his own life story.
He does, but it comes with a grim realization. Every single struggle, every multiversal war, every loss he faces in Doomsday and beyond is just a necessary, unavoidable step to fulfill a destiny he has already seen completed by an older version of himself.
Wow.
He has to suffer through the pain, knowing the ending is already written.
Man, let's pull all these threads together because this has been an incredible journey. We started with Steve blowing past his time travel re-entry point in Endgame. That seemingly harmless choice triggered an intervention by Loki, who is the new manager of the multiverse.
Yep.
To prevent Steve's presence in the past from causing an incursion, Loki exiles Steve and his family to a 10-year peaceful retirement when Universe 828, which is a 1960s utopia protected by the Fantastic Four.
But the collapse of the multiverse during Doomsday alerts Reed Richards to Steve's presence, which pulls him right back into the conflict.
Which sets up this entirely mind-bending time loop that proves the pristine Captain America shield Sam Wilson wields was always fundamentally meant for Sam. It is just a staggering piece of serialized narrative architecture. It turns a potential plot hole into a deeply emotional revelation.
It definitely requires the audience to trust the storytellers, but the payoff for actually understanding these mechanics is immense.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final kind of provocative thought that I want you to mull over as we wrap up today. If Loki is now sitting on the throne at the end of time, managing the Yggdrasil tree specifically to allow for free will, but Steve Rogers is trapped in this strict Bootstrap Paradox where he absolutely must endure years of war just to eventually go back to that bench to give Sam the shield. Does Steve Rogers actually have free will at all?
Oh, that's heavy.
Right. Or is the ultimate final sacrifice of Captain America giving up his own free will entirely just to ensure that his best friend's legacy remains intact?
That is a fascinating paradox to leave hanging in the air.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the timelines around you, and we will catch you next time.